When setting up any type of form, you'll want to make sure you are using Klaviyo's behavioral targeting features. Behavioral targeting allows you to specifically say when, where, and how your form appears, and also who your form appears to. Nothing's more annoying than a pop-up appearing at the wrong time, causing your visitor to close your pop-up due to annoyance. Let's go through what each of the targets mean inside your Klaviyo account. Once you're in your Klaviyo account, if you click on any of your forms, I'm going to actually go back and click on a pop-up form or even a flyout and click Edit Form. And if you're creating a new form, you'll see that it takes you straight to this page. But if you're editing an old form, then you'll go through these steps. So you'll see three blocks. You'll see the styles block, your targeting and behavior block, and then you can add more blocks. We're going to specifically focus on targeting and behavior for this section. Let's go through each of what each of these targets mean and what they mean for the experience of the user on your site. So first we go by display timing. Display timing really just tells Klaviyo how soon do you want this pop-up to appear. The default is show immediately on page load. This typically is not something that you want to do with your pop-ups, especially the ones saying here's 10% off or here's 15% off, welcoming a new subscriber. You want a little bit of a delay. And that's just because the person just landed on your site. They're probably not familiar with your site. And if a pop-up appears right away, they're most likely to close it. So what I say when using a loading delay, usually go for about 7 seconds or more. So 7 seconds is pretty typical and usually enough time for the person to kind of scroll at least through the first headline or the first images of the page and gives them a sense of, okay, I'm going to stay and sign up. Anything more than 15 seconds tends to be a little long, and I would say usually only go over 15 seconds if you're questionable about the quality of the people who are coming to your site and you want to make sure that you're capturing the most engaged. So as you're starting out, stick with 7 seconds. Another option that you can do is an exit intent, and we're going to talk about that when we go through one of the pop-up builds that we're going to do. But exit intent basically says, hey, don't show this pop-up unless the person seems like they're going to X out either this tab or close out the browser altogether, and then the pop-up will appear. The next delay that you can have is a scroll delay. So a scroll delay you would do by percentages. So don't show this pop-up until they scrolled through 25% of the page, which is usually above the fold, 50% of the page, which is right on the fold, and then anything that's more than 50% really means that they're scrolling to the bottom. So just to give you an example, anything here, once I scroll to this second bit, that's usually a 25%. And then as I get towards the middle over here, you can see that scroll button. This is probably a 50%. And then as we go down below now, I'm at 75%. So it depends how much engagement you want that person to have before you show them the pop-up, whether you're going to have this percentage on or not. Once you've done those loading delay section, then the next thing you want to do is the display frequency. So this is important because your pop-up can appear every time someone comes on the page if you let it, and you don't want that to happen, especially if they've just signed up already or they've closed out before. If they come to your page the next day, you don't want that pop-up showing up again. So leaving this checked is really important if you want that to happen. So don't show again after submit form or go to URL action. So basically don't show after they've submitted their email. Then the next thing is show again after how many days after they close it. So some people are going to close out your pop-up, of course, without even signing up. So how soon after they close it do you want it to appear? So let's say someone comes on your site today, they close the pop-up, they're not interested, but then they come back to your site 7 days later. Do you want this pop-up to appear again or not? So this depends on you and what you think the appetite for your consumer is on your site. What I would say, start with 90 days, which is the default. See what your signups look like. If you notice you're losing a lot of signups and people are not signing up, then maybe you want to bring that down because there could be a lot of people closing because they're not sure yet. But if they're coming back to your site, then you want to capture those return visitors' emails. So maybe you would shorten that. The next thing that's going to be important about your behavioral targeting is whether you're going to use this pop-up to show on both desktop and mobile to the same pop-up form, whether you want it to only appear on desktop or whether you want it to only appear on mobile. And the reason for doing that is style. Basically, mobile is completely different from desktop. The experience of signing up is completely different. So for most parts, you're going to want a mobile only design, and then you're going to want a desktop only design. So we're going to work on that with our class project. So you'll be able to do a desktop only pop-up and a mobile only pop-up. So decide on that. And then this dismissal section, when someone is on your site, so it's hard to see here, but let's say this gray area was my website, and then here's my pop-up form. So it's asking you when they're on desktop, do you want, in order to close the pop-up, they can click the X button, or they can click anywhere outside of the pop-up. So which is usually the area that's basically your website. So do you want them to click on that to close the pop-up? If so, then just say yes for a desktop, and you can do that also for mobile. What I find is I usually leave mobile toggled off, because there's not usually a lot of space on mobile. If we go back to mobile here, you'll see, and people are tapping. So it's up to you if you want to leave that on for mobile, but desktop, I would say yes. It's pretty typical, and people are used to just clicking outside to close, and it can get annoying if they have to just click on the X. So just think about that. Now, this is the section that we're going to talk about a lot for the next, for the class project. So your targeting areas. So you have the option to show to every single visitor who comes to your site. So if you're a new brand, you don't have anyone on your email list, I would say show to all visitors, of course, because you need to collect email addresses from everyone who shows up. As you start collecting emails from people and you already have a subscriber list, you of course don't want this pop-up to show to those people because you already have their emails. So what you can do is say don't show to existing Klaviyo profiles. There's a little trickiness to this because profiles is everyone in your Klaviyo account. Doesn't necessarily mean they sign up for your list. So sometimes I actually don't use this, and instead what I do is target visitors in a certain list or segment. And you can choose basically the positive of this, which is show it to them, or the negative of this, which is don't show it to them. So I would choose the negative, don't show to people on my master list. So that's usually what I do. And it really depends on the pop-up you're using, whether you'd use the profiles or the list, but I usually go for this. The next thing that will become important, and we're going to go over this when we're doing the class project examples, is displaying by URL. So I'm not going to go over this in this part just because we're going to do it in detail when we're setting up our pop-ups later, but you can display on certain URLs only. Or you can also say don't show on certain URLs. So let's say I don't want this to show on my cart page because they're checking out. I don't want to disrupt that experience with a pop-up. So I'm going to exclude it from these pages, right? So that's something that you may consider doing. And then last but not least, we have locations. So you can target visitors depending on whether they're in certain locations. There are some brands that don't sell to international audiences. They only sell within the US. So if that's the case of yours, then you might say show only, or actually what I would do is don't show. I do the negative of it. Don't show to visitors in a certain region. So I would say don't show to, people in the European Union. Or like I said, you would do this and say only show to people in North America. So you can play with these however you like, whatever works best for your brand.